Now, Tim, we all have our own special relationship with the BBC in the UK, and you've got vast amounts of news output. You can't possibly monitor it all and watch it all. What do you actually listen and watch on a daily basis?
Personally, I spread it around a bit. So actually, I'm joining you from Glasgow. So I've been with the Good Morning Scotland team, and actually the Scottish Channel 9 bulletin last night, Alex. So the answer to your question is I'm immersed in Scottish politics, the Scottish fan zone. So to your question, I mean, I do kind of have quite a broad listening and viewing kind of selection that I'll go through. I'll also make sure that the really landmark programs, whether it's the 6 o'clock news, 10 o'clock news, Today, and Panorama, you're across. That's the job.
And do you, as editor in chief, do you want more decisions coming up to your level, or less in the way that you'd be running the BBC?
I think we're pretty well balanced, but certainly not. It's not about all of the things coming through the system to me. I mean, in some ways you can over exaggerate the curiosities of the BBC. You think about if you were running a big retail operation, you need those processes, you need those systems so that store managers in that scenario can make their decisions. For me, empowered good editors with proper process. I mean, we're making thousands of hours. And as to your point, we have our traumas. We make mistakes now and again, but actually across the world as we speak today, we've got a brilliant set of editors with very good guidelines, delivering very high quality news coverage. I don't think the system works. I think it's right that I'm editor in chief and you make those really big calls and you come in and set the tone and do the things you need to. And now and again, there's a call, just like there would be in any business, where you've got something of corporate importance. But the answer to your question is no. I think a system that relies on everything in a very hierarchical way being referred up to the top.
So yesterday, there was a bit of a fuss over royal babies' names. Does that come to you? I mean, was there someone that kind of tapped you on the shoulder and said, "Oh, we've got this"?
It's bluntly being very open about it. If something hits the main headlines, I will be briefed to make sure that I am happy with where the corporation is and understand the situation fully. But this is not unmanageable. There is, the BBC does throw them up, as you said in your introduction, on a regular basis. But overall, I make a judgment with my top team on whether something is, if you like, of corporate importance. Which, if you think about the other CEOs listening in, that's how it works. The real thing is making sure you've got the guidelines, the processes, the quality of editors in place, just as you would have in the FT, that can run their areas efficiently and properly.
Well, indeed, and you've made impartiality a big kind of theme since taking over. Do you feel like you've corrected whatever you wanted to correct already, or are you going to have to look at more structural changes as well? Is there more to come?
This is an ongoing project, and I thought, and I've been very open about it. I think the issue for us was not primarily, although there's a lot of noise around it. If you're the national broadcaster, our intent is absolutely to be impartial, offer fair and balanced coverage. Yeah, there's no doubt there's enormous amounts of heat. I mean, I'm in Scotland, where if you think about the debates around independence and all those things, navigating that course, and I know, again, people like the FT do the same thing. Politically is one thing, but I think there's something slightly deeper in a more polarized society where you've got, choose your cliche, but echo chambers, and the idea that you're not actively seeking out others' opinion, broader, non-metropolitan views. And I just think there is danger in any organization of a degree of groupthink. And I think that's going to be something we're not going to, I do see things that I could look at and say, okay, I'm really pleased. I think when we look at that section of the website, it now seems to really reflect a breadth of concerns and thinking. So I'm pleased on where we're going. I'm pleased where we are politically. I think actually when we did the local and national elections, I'm proud of our coverage. I think we truly delivered impartial coverage. But to your point, we've got lots of work to do in terms of seeking out different perspectives. People that don't feel they get their voice heard in institutions. Yeah. We know how vulnerable that can be. So that is ongoing work, and all relates all the way back to who we bring into the organisation. This is going to take quite some time.
Yeah, and indeed, I mean, you know, obviously, most recently you've had the Dyson report and the controversy around the Martin Bashir Diana interview, and how he was brought into the organisation. That's coming out. So, I mean, do you think you potentially might have people leaving the BBC as a result of those findings in the end? I mean, are you going to have to look at your management team as well?
Well, it's way too early to speculate, and you won't be surprised. I'm going to wait for the report on the rehiring before I make any conclusions. So yeah, I think to be honest, I mean, as DG in charge, I mean that was more recent, but 25 years ago, I mean, a pretty grim affair. I think, you know, Alex, I've been very active in saying, let's get to the truth. And it's the same with the rehiring. We'll just be very clear on what happened and make make our conclusions from that.
You know, I mean, and, you know, one of the other things I find extraordinary in terms of how you juggle is, you know, being editor-in-chief, meeting the government, at the same time being director general and having to negotiate with that government what your budget is going to be and how the BBC changes in the years to come. I mean, what are those conversations like? I mean, how do you manage it?
I think they're fairly rational. Yeah, so in terms of what I mean by that is, I think the lines are clearly drawn in the charter. It's not. I think sometimes people overcomplicate things. I mean, we are ferociously independent editorially. We do that without fear or favour. There's no problem with that. If you've got the right people, we've also got, the director of news, the news operation, everyone, our editorial teams are not involved in that negotiation. And then when I go in, it is a clear discussion. I mean, for those who aren't experts on the BBC, we've got the next 5 years of funding to agree with the government, and we're in that process.
But I mean, you last year, I think you went in to see Don Cummings. You had your political editor with you. Is that as editor in chief, or are you talking about the future of the BBC, or is it all of it? How does that go?
Well, when I'm meeting, I am the leader of the BBC. Yeah, in the round, I don't find that problematic. I can have a discussion around, as I say, you go back to the charter and the rules of the road. They're not that complicated to a degree. You go, okay, here's my funding. It is completely, you are not linking that. Enough, it's totally non-negotiable. And you see that judges from our record on that, in terms of how we go after stories. If you're the BBC, the one thing you are not going to trade on is independence, impartiality, and reporting without fear or favour. I would say, by the way, just a little kind of, flag wave for our system. I think most politicians that I meet across the spectrum value that democratic process. They may have a view that interview was unfair or that program or whatever, but by and large, we can beat ourselves up a bit here. By and large, there is general support for a proper functioning media, truly going after story, and you all know this, impartiality. And they'll all have their gripes, they'll all have their views, but there is general support for that. So I don't have a problem with that. I think that can function. You need strong-willed individuals on both sides of the table who know where the lines are, but it's okay. It's okay. It works.
I mean, shortly after you came in, decriminalization was kind of shelved. Did you put that down as a win for you? I mean, is that personal?
Well, forget about me. We thought that was not a smart idea. So, and the BBC was it wasn't cryptic. It was very clear that we thought the logic behind decriminalisation of the licence fee was problematic. I think the two problems, by the way. One is, you're either in this system or you're not. This is a universal intervention. It's slightly strange, but it's a wonder. And it grows the creative industries, works. So to me, it's a precious thing for the UK. And we're admired. I mean, there's people around the world, I'm sure, on this call, but it is admired globally. It's one of the things we do pretty well. The second is the alternatives weren't particularly cost effective. So I think, I was very pleased we won that argument.
I mean, you mentioned the world, and obviously you're more than a national broadcaster. You've got a huge presence and operations, and you make money around the world. I mean, on the news side, you said you want to reach a billion viewers and listeners around the world, and also think about how to introduce paywalls around some news and factual content and raise money that way. How do you balance those two, and how are you going to find the money to actually make a big investment like that outside of the UK?
Yeah, it's a great it's one of those it's a great question, because it's a real, what you've said there is exactly right. It's the balance in terms of reach and then financial return. And I do think, for what it's worth, I see it differently between news, world service, and, if you like, fair, trusted, impartial information. I mean, we have reach in places like Afghanistan or other places where commercial income is not at the forefront of my mind. It's about ensuring fair information is getting through there on the BBC, and that's funded, partly by the license fee, partly by the FCDO, so from the government. So clearly, on those objectives, you're not primarily about financial return. Having said that, when you take, for those who don't know, we have the BBC Studios business, which you were referring to, 1.4 billion of revenues, decent profitability, but some real choices now around the paywall. And we are beginning that journey. The question is at what speed you go and how cold turkey you go on your current revenues. There'll be many businesses in the same type of dilemma as they migrate this path. When it comes to news, to answer your question directly, I think my focus is where we've got areas like the US, where you've got more disposable income, you've got more competition. I think there is, and you've got scale, I should say. You do at that point say you want to be actively looking at making sure you can commercialize. And I am interested in a paywall around some of the news products, and also our factual programming. We've got a service in the US, BritBox, that's doing really well, but that is more on the drama side. So you will see us make moves in other areas.
I mean, if you were running this, put the kind of resource aside, I mean, just as a strategy, would you be accelerating that faster to introduce the paywall and kind of, even if it takes a lot of pain on in terms of licensing revenues and things that would be lost? I mean, would you go faster as a preference?
Broadly, yes, and I think we need to. Broadly, yes. Okay. The reason I'm hedging slightly...
And so you've made that pitch to the government, presumably, and are they in the mood to...
The issue in the medium term, I mean, we've said publicly, by the way, that there is a balance here, because you've got your ongoing revenues and we want to keep delivering competitive margins. So the question is how much you can invest, because these things aren't, again, there'll be a lot of people on this call who get this, which is moving towards that digital model is not necessarily cash accretive in the next 5 years. As you know, look at the debt profile on all of these journeys. So I think we're balancing that. I do think it's slightly complicated for us. I don't like adding complication for the sake of it, because some of it is simple, by the way. Moving to paywall in some areas makes total sense. We can move aggressively, and we've done so, and we will continue to do more. And to your point, could we move faster? I'd like to. Yeah. I think there's some areas where you're creating content together, whether it's major natural history landmarks, some of these really big dramas, where actually co-production partners, and it's a finely balanced decision about whether you're buying all the rights up front and putting it to your own service, or you're going into co-production, limiting your cash risk up front. And actually that works, because the primary revenue for me is, of course, making sure the license fee is great value for money. And my strategy is very simple. The BBC strategy is very simple. It's not about, focused on politicians or anyone else. It's focused on, do you and your family get £159 of value for every household? And in some ways, it's not, co-production and securing that content is probably one of the key bits of jeopardy for the BBC. So it's not necessarily all about going direct to consumer.
Okay. And actually, I'm going to draw on one of the questions that came in that comes to that point, is how do you manage to justify financially the BBC's huge interest in investments in international news when, and the international operations to some degree, when, ultimately you're responsible to the taxpayer and delivered here?
It's a very fair question. I think the international news is one thing, and I think that is easily justifiable, which is clearly I think one of the things we bring to UK audiences, and one thing that I've always valued about the BBC as someone who used to be a consumer rather than an executive, is that international coverage and truly understanding what's going on around the world is clearly a value for it's part of the UK's DNA. I think on the services, radio, online, television beyond the UK's borders, that is a blended funding. So you're spending about 250 million of the license fee out of 3.7 billion, and you've got 90 odd million from government on that. So it is a blended fund. And I do think there's something about the UK economy, by the way, the stats are pretty good on this, and what we are as the UK, that it does make sense to spend a proportion of that UK revenue on making sure we've got good global presence. So by the way, the whole thing works together, the bureaus and the services. But I do think your question is well put. There is a limit to that. And I think, we're at a pretty good situation now.
Would you want to see the borrowing limit of the BBC raised so you could actually invest in some of the kind of international commercial?
I think there's a
borrowing
case
rather than.
Yeah, I think on the commercial side, there is a case to say, we do have quite, very low gearing. I mean, the truth of this is, you can normally get. I mean, again, there's, as people know, there's plenty of capital out there. It's a question of what the cost of capital is, and I'm not just talking payments. I'm talking, are you giving up equity, IP in productions? I think there is a case that says, actually, from a UK PLC point of view, BBC Studios is in, a unique position to grow its IP, and there is a case for more borrowing. Yes, and that's a conversation we're engaged in.
I mean, if
I don't want to go into exact, I don't want to go into exact levels at the moment, Alex, because I do think that's part of the discussions with government. But I do think there's a case. Let's leave it there. Yeah.
And okay, so another question that's related is how important is advertising revenue to the BBC internationally, and how much of a priority is it moving forward? I mean, particularly if you're going behind paywalls on for some factual news, etc. I mean, how do you make that balance with advertising?
It's still pretty critical in terms of, but the longer term picture. If you look at our growth in our revenues, I think there's two areas where our commercial revenue looks very exciting. One is production. This is a bit in the beltway, but we've got this incredible world-class, think about our natural history unit or our documentary unit or our dramas. We've only been making for the BBC, now we make for anyone. In the latest BAFTAs, one of the Netflix award winners was actually made by BBC Studios. Yeah? So Surgeon's Cut, that's the programme plug. So what I'm saying there is there's plenty of revenue, and that's not, so I'm not answering the question because I'm saying that's where there's a lot of revenue growth. The other is, if you take BritBox, you'll take some of our D2C plays, working with others, lots of growth there. So look, I think the advertising slug is hundreds of millions, and it's important. We've got a traditional channel business. There will be more, I think, blended models where you've got advertising and ad funded and advertising video on demand. But it's not, if I'm being really honest, it's not the real area of growth for us. The real area is subscription growth and production revenue and IP growth. They're the real motors of the business going forward.
Okay. Just to change gears, we've got a question on scandals that have come through. I mean, you were acting DG after George Entwistle had to step aside because of the Jimmy Savile scandal in 2012. How do you compare the current Bashir scandal with that? Is it as damaging reputationally? And are there common threads between the two in terms of poor oversight and editorial judgment?
It's really difficult to benchmark these things, isn't it? Because they're asymmetric. I mean, they're different shapes. I think the truth is that you manage these scandals, but the worry for us is our system is based on trust. The one thing, impartiality and trust are sacrosanct for that. And you can give up trust, as the leaders on this call know, you can give up trust quite quickly. It takes a lot of work to build it back. And I think they're the similarities. I mean, I don't want to benchmark it. I mean, I think the Savile case was really very, very disturbing in terms of in the deep history of what went on there. And if you think about the impacts, very severe. Martin Bashir, a very serious incident as well. The worry, I mean, in terms of leadership, I think what I would say is you want to be very accountable. I think this is difficult for leaders sometimes to say, look, we just want to get at the truth, however uncomfortable, just get at it, which has always been the way I want to work. And then building back trust, I don't think you can do it in a tokenistic way. You've got to do it day in, day out, and build it back. And I think that's the learnings. I mean, as I say, you can lose it quick. Sorry.
I mean, in both of these circumstances, you've had situations where you're having to criticise potentially your predecessors or your predecessors' actions. How do you weigh that up? I mean, it must be pretty uncomfortable, and particularly when you work with these people that have been your mentors over the years.
It's not. These are really tough things to do. But at the end of the day, like anyone leading, and you act in the corporate interest, and you're trying to act fairly, but really making sure that you are accountable and you're getting after the truth. The one thing I've learned in life is you've just got to go and get the facts and share them openly. And if you don't do that, I think I'm less interested, if I'm being really provocative, about comms, and this, how do we spin the story? Forget all that. My learnings are very clear. You go and find out what happened. You just deal with it. Yeah. And I think if you do that, you can move on. I think in this age, it's an age in which accountability is everything. You need to be accountable. You need to show what you're doing, and I think it's all out there. So, but I do think they're very concerning. These incidents. They're about, but you've just got to build back trust. The final thing I would say is you've got to keep perspective as well. We're delivering thousands of hours a day, really good programming. If you go out in Glasgow here and talk to people, they are interested in what's on at 9 o'clock tonight. They're interested in the dramas. They're interested in how we deliver our local news coverage. So in terms of keeping your own perspective on this, I think it's really important you get close to audiences and listen to them, not just with the greatest respect, not just the inner press bubble. Do you know what I mean? I think that is important for CEOs.
It's a very fine audience. Very final thing, we've got about a minute left, and I'm going to ask this in two ways. We've got the question came in, to what extent would you say the culture wars have cut through to a broad UK audience, and how's that informing your coverage? And secondary to that, we've got Andrew Neil coming up in about 5 minutes, who I'll be interviewing. Do you want GB News to succeed?
You're going to get the diplomatic answer, which happens to be true, Alex, which is I absolutely think we've always from day, since I was growing up, you've had different media sources. Plurality is absolutely critical to the UK market, and I absolutely think that we should embrace it, learn from it. I don't think there should be any arrogance on our part. There's probably stuff I'll learn from Andrew's. I've got enormous time for Andrew. I'm sure he's going to do a few things in GB News that I'll want to learn from. That's how we should treat this. And I think the last thing we'll do is say, this isn't serious competition, or describe them in cliche terms. I'm sure there'll be lots of things they do very well, and Andrew's a very accomplished journalist, and I think we'll learn. On culture wars, by the way, welcome to modern Britain. I think navigating that, listening to different perspectives, being comfortable, by the way, of opening up different opinions. That's the game. That's the game now, and I think everyone in my generation is walking a bit of a tightrope. But hey ho, that's what we've got to do, and kind of enjoy it a little bit if we can.
But look, thank you. We are overrun already, so we've got a couple of minutes before Andrew. Just to say a big thank you to you, Tim. Appreciate your time and for being open with us. All right, thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
Join us again in a few minutes with Andrew Neil. Thanks.
Bye.